Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at how do we solve quadratics by factoring. So we already learned how to factor, but what we need to know now is how do we use that to solve quadratics. So if you look right here, this is already a factored form of a quadratic. We have x plus 3 and x minus 2. If I was to graph this, it would look something like this. We would have a point here and we would have a point here. And it would be a parabola sort of kind of like, whoops. Sort of kind of like that. So what do you notice? That basically when you factor a quadratic, what you end up with is called the zeros, which we had already seen in the other videos. The zeros are where they cross the x-axis. So basically here, x is crossing the quadratic is crossing the x-axis, at -3 and at +2. We're going to learn how do we use factoring to actually solve for these. So let's go ahead and take a look at example 1. Now, first of all, it just says solve using the zero product property. What that means is basically if you have two things that are being multiplied that equal to 0, either the first one is equal to 0 or the second one is equal to 0. So that's what we're going to use to help us solve this. So in the zero product property, here we have p minus 2 times 3 plus 1. We're going to go ahead and substitute a 0 for y. And now basically what that means is that the first thing, p minus 2, is equal to 0, or the second one is equal to 0. So I'm going to set both equal to 0 and solve. P minus 2 is 0. If I'm solving, I add 2 to both sides, and I end up with p is equal to 2. I solve over here. How do I get rid of a plus 1? I subtract 1. So we're left with 3p is equal to -1. How do I get rid of that 3? It's multiplying. The opposite is to divide. And so my p is -1/3. I have now found what are called the roots or the solutions. So basically what we have found is that this quadratic is crossing somewhere over here at -1/3 and somewhere over here at 2. And would look something like that. Okay, let's go ahead and look at example 2. In example 2, same thing. We're going to if you notice, this isn't factored, so we need to factor it. So we're going to go ahead and replace, instead of y, we're going to put a 0. And then we're going to try and factor this how we were doing before. I'm not going to go over the factoring step because you should already know that. So we factor, and here are my factors. K plus 5 times 4k minus 1. What am I going to do? I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. So k plus 5 is equal to 0, and 4k minus 1 is equal to 0. Why? Because again, you're multiplying two things, so either the first one's 0 or the second one is 0. So if I solve here, I would go ahead and subtract 5, and I get k is -5. If I was solving over here, I add 1, and then I would divide by 4, and so k would be 1/4. So I have k is -5 and k is 1/4. Those are my roots. Again, what would this, positive 1/4. What would this look like in terms of my graph? If I was to graph this, basically what I'm seeing is that it's crossing somewhere over here at 1/4, and it's crossing somewhere over here at -5, and that's how my parabolas would look like. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at example 3. Same thing in example 3, except if you notice, it's not in standard form for us. So we need to first get it into standard form before we do anything to this problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add 16 to both sides. So that way I can end up with this quadratic in standard form. So 3d squared minus 16d plus 16 is equal to 0. Now that I've written it in standard form, now I can go ahead and do my regular math. So I'm going to factor. So remember when you factored this, we did 3 times 16. And so if you multiply 3 times 16, you get 48. Factors of 48 that give you -16 are -12 and -4. So I'm going to put -12 minus 4. And again, zero product property. So this means that this is 0 or this is 0 if it's equaling 0. So 3d minus, oops, I read it wrong. I'm sorry. They had already written it for me. -4 and -12. 3d minus 4 and d minus 12. Again, I'm ahead of myself. I'm not showing the factoring steps. You had to rewrite this as 3d squared minus 12d minus 4d plus 16. Done your grouping, and this is what you would have ended up with. So 3d minus 4 is equal to 0. Wait, hang on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the factoring because I don't think this is the right answer. So just scratch that off. Let's do the factoring ourselves. We can take out 3d and we are left with d minus 4. We can take out a minus 4 and we're left with d minus 4. So our factors are 3d minus 4. Sorry, that's why. D minus 4. So it was right. I was just not factoring right. Okay, so now that we know that, let's go ahead and set this equal to 0. So the first part's equal to 0 or the second part's equal to 0. So we've set the first part equal to 0. 3d minus 4 is equal to 0. So I would add 4 to both sides. And so 3d is equal to 4. Sorry, 3d is equal to 4. And to get d by itself, I divide by 3. So I get that d is equal to 4/3. Okay, now let's do the second part. Second part, we're going to go ahead and set d minus 4 equal to 0. Well, if I add 4 to both sides, I get that d is 4. So my two zeros are 4/3 and 4.